Recognizing the member for Richmond-Steveston.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I am speaking today in favour of Bill 2, National Day for Truth and Reconciliation Act. I believe that this is an incredibly important and powerful tool that we can use to build dialogue in our communities, increase knowledge of our shared history that has to now really been erased and rewritten in a very colonial way. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission called for the creation of a statutory holiday to commemorate the history and legacy of the residential school system. So today, we are already celebrating or recognizing September 30th as Orange Shirt Day. And I think it's really important to recognize the work of Phyllis Webstad and other survivors of the residential school system in the grassroots campaign that built the momentum that has really swept across BC and across Canada. My colleague noted how many orange shirts that we see now when we go out in public on September 30th. And I know for a fact that every school in Richmond is very dedicated to sharing information about the history of colonial British Columbia and encouraging students to wear orange. Every child matters. That is the message that Phyllis Webstad wants us to know. Every child matters. And it's really important to say that because in the history of this province, in this country, not every child mattered. There are unmarked graves in the thousands in this country and hundreds more being discovered regularly. It is a work that is ongoing, and it is heartbreaking for communities and for everyone who's involved. As a mom of young children, it is very difficult for me to comprehend the atrocity that was done upon children in this country. Schools for white children don't have graves on them. There is a senior member in my family who went to boarding school as a young person. He's white, and his boarding school did not have a grave on it. Residential schools inflicted incredible trauma upon young people. Not just the ones who didn't make it home, but the ones who did. And it was not just once, it wasn't a period of time. It was generation after generation after generation of kids not coming home or coming home broken. I think that it's really important that we educate ourselves on the realities that Indigenous people in this country have faced. There is a real lack of awareness, but it is being rectified, and it's the work of Phyllis Webstad and other Indigenous survivors that have never given up, and their courage inspires us all. But it's not just education, although that is the gateway to doing better. We need to take action. And I hear this through so many communities that knowledge without action is almost worse than ignorance, because how can you know and not do better? So I think that passing this bill to have a day of commemoration, a day specifically put aside for learning and coming together, to know more about our shared history in British Columbia and Canada, and to really honor the strength and resilience of Indigenous communities. Because despite the trauma that they have had inflicted upon them, despite everything that has happened The thing that I hear very frequently, and it is so powerful, the words, "We're still here," despite everything. So I would just like to honor those words, because that is the strength of unimaginable strength to be able to come forward and say, this is the time for reconciliation. This is what we're going to do. We're going to have Orange Shirt Day, and we're not going to stop until we take action on all of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's call to action. And this particular bill addresses the call to action number 80. And the more that we do this work here in the legislature, and the more that this work is done with the federal government, the more that I have hope for the future. And hope is really important because it keeps us going, it inspires us, it is a future that we can see that is better than the one that we have today. And that is why we do this work, to lift us all up, to make sure that we are looking after each other as we would look after our own. So, building on UNDRIP is so important. And taking action, TRC action number 80, is incredibly important. I very much hope that, like UNDRIP, we can have the unanimous support of the House so that we can move forward with a statutory holiday where we can engage with the public, where we're encouraged to have these conversations. It's not a holiday, just to be clear. It is a day that we can reflect and learn and connect and build those communities and build those connections. I'd also like to offer some words that I have learned from a strong Indigenous woman. And it's that if you're asking for some of this emotional labor, if you're asking for this education, if you're being a settler or an immigrant and now a settler, if you're asking for that work, compensate them. So if you're asking for a special speaker to come to your work to do, take action on reconciliation, which is very important, and I really do encourage people, you need to compensate them. It is not their free time. It is part of reconciliation, is compensating people appropriately for the work they do. Reconciliation is going to be a long road. I see that work happening here every day. Every day that I am in the legislature, every day that I'm doing my job, I'm seeing the question being asked, how does this fit in with reconciliation? It's not going to be an easy road, but we are all here in it for the long haul. So this bill, Bill 2, is one more important step along the way of that journey. I think it's also really important that we learn about the places that we are specifically from. So while we are all in British Columbia, we all have places that we call home. I come from the territory of the Musqueam First Nation. I am in Steveston. And you may have heard of Garry Point Park. And you may also know that the Point family is quite prominent in the Musqueam community. And I have so much respect for the Point family and known them for a number of years, coming to welcome us to their territory at numerous functions and events. Now, Garry Point was actually named after Nicholas Garry, who is the deputy governor of the Hudson's Bay Company back in the 1800s. So this spit of land that had a name was renamed Garry Point. And at the same time, settlers were coming in from all over to Steveston, and the Musqueam were pushed further and further into the corner until all they had left was 7 or 8 homes on Garry Point. Now, the Point family, you may have thought, maybe Garry Point was named after them. Unfortunately, that's not the case. So the Point family is actually named after the Deputy Governor of the Hudson's Bay Company, because the Point family was required to take an Anglican last name in order to have ID cards. So that is a piece of history from my corner of the world. And I would really encourage everybody here to think about the histories of your corners of the world and take the time, not just on September 30th, but any time of the year is a good day to learn, to take that time to learn about the history of where you are. Now, the conversations that we're having are incredibly difficult. The trauma is still very real. This isn't something that happened a long time ago. It did happen a long time ago, but it also happened recently. The person in my family that went to boarding school is in his 70s, and he's younger than the survivors. So for anybody who is needing support services, is facing crisis because of the conversations that are being had, I would really recommend that they reach out for help. The Indian Residential School Crisis Line is available. It's a national service for anybody finding distress because of the residential school experience. And it's a 1-866 number, 1-866-925-4419. The KUU-US Crisis Line Society is a crisis service for Indigenous people in BC. Adults and elders can call 250-723-4050, and they have a children and youth line, 250-723-2040. There are so many impacts to our communities, and they are intergenerational, and when you compound them through the generations, it's incredibly traumatic. So I encourage everyone to not try to do it alone, that this is a time to come together, time to heal. So in conclusion, Madam Speaker, I am in support of Bill 2 for the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. I think this is a very important step to take to address reconciliation in the province of British Columbia, and a very good way to open dialogue, opportunities to learn and connect and do better. Thank you.
Thank you, member.